Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Pacific Stage. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here with our next section titled Entertainment Partners Explores the Future of Production, presented by Entertainment Partners. It is my pleasure to welcome our moderators, Joseph Chianese and Lindsay Hethkett. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you to my panelists and my co-moderator, Lindsay.
Hi.
Should we kick it off?
Fantastic, Joe. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you to everyone on the AFM, committee that's put this amazing event together for us virtually. Who would have thought 2 years ago that we would all be attending AFM from the comfort of our homes, bedrooms, kitchens, and wherever you might be finding yourself, which leads us straight into our topic here around the future of production. Hollywood is no longer just a concept of a place where the elites come and produce content. Hollywood's actually become a concept where everyone around the world is able to produce and also distribute. So wanted to kick over here to our my co-moderator, Joseph Chianese, to just introduce himself and also our panelists.
Yes, I'm Joe Chianese, Senior Vice President and Practice Leader for Production Incentives at Entertainment Partners. And this is really just going to be a really fun conversation amongst producers of content and technology, thought leaders and advisors as we really discuss the evolution of production. And, I couldn't be more excited to have this group of panelists because all of them, for a variety of different reasons, are on the cutting edge of the future of production. And I thought it would be best for each of them to introduce themselves because they have such broad bios, but I wanted them to sort of highlight the things that are most relevant, especially relevant to the topic. So I'm going to start and ask Tom Ari to introduce himself.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Guess that's part of what goes with having A in your last name. You go first. Tom Ara. I am an attorney. I co-lead the sports media and entertainment practice at DLA Piper. I'm based in Los Angeles in our Century City office. Our firm is a large firm, global firm with over 4,000 lawyers and a significant sports media and entertainment practice that really covers the gamut of disciplines under that umbrella, focusing on areas that probably are relevant to what we're going to be discussing today. We have quite a significant practice in both digital content and digital content creation, but also kind of spanning out to gaming, virtual reality, augmented reality, as well as a fair amount of work in the blockchain and crypto space. We've actually been quite involved in NFTs and NFT related content deals, both on the platform side as well as the content owner and creator side. In fact, I'm in New York right now at an event relating to NFTs and content distribution through NFTs. So it's an important area for our group and our practice and continuing to proliferate. We're seeing in the entertainment industry in particular, film and television, lots of interest from the studios. And my practice is both on the corporate and finance side as well as the tech side on the licensing related aspects of content that tie into anything technological convergence with media and entertainment. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Tom.
Tom, lovely to have you. Thank you. Next, we have Yolanda Cochran. She is the SVP of Live Action Production at Nickelodeon Awesomeness. Yolanda, you've got such an extensive background. Please share.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm currently with Viacom Kids and Family, where I oversee live action production for both Nickelodeon and Awesomeness TV. I cover scripted, unscripted, specials, made for television movies. And I also am a member of the Producers Guild of America, where I serve on a few task force, one of them being in the early days of devising our guild response to returning to work safely. So it was the COVID task force, as well as years prior, I had served on our anti-harassment task force. I'm also a member of the Academy and the Television Academy, and as well as some other initiatives to address safety in the workplace, and also emerging production solutions and those types of things. So I'm happy to be here joining this panel today.
Thank you so much. And next we have Chris Cox. Chris is a virtual production producer at Pixamundo.
Everybody, thank you so much for having me on the panel. I'm very excited to be here with everyone. Yeah, I'm a virtual production producer at Pixamundo. Previously, I've been head of CG, stereo producer. But right now with Pixamundo, we're working extensively on being major players in the industry for virtual production and our expansion for a variety of locations, mostly North America at the moment. Working closely with our partners in Canada, William F. White, and one of my counterparts over here, Edward, who's also on the panel. But we're working very hard at trying to get put our fingerprints and develop a legacy on virtual production throughout the industry. So very excited to be here and to discuss with everybody. Thank you for having me.
And we're excited to hear more about all of that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Then we have Glenn Gaynor, Head of Physical Production at Amazon Original Movies at Amazon Studios.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. I guess my background in brevity, I've come from, producing movies. Originally, a lot of independent films, gave certain directors like Nicolas Cage their opportunity to direct, from turning from actors to directors. After producing for some time, I moved over to, or was seriously invited to just take over and create a company, physical production for Screen Gems, where I executive produced as well there for about 14 years. And during my tenure at Sony Pictures, created in part Sony Innovation Studios, where I was president of that company for a few years, working closely with our friends in Tokyo for research and development, and SIE, Sony Interactive Entertainment. And a year ago, became very excited about joining a friend of mine at Amazon Studios, because Amazon Studios is really coming into play, and they needed a head of physical production on the movie side. It sounded like a great opportunity because I love the content there. It's a very, very amazing journey to be able to humble servant of story in this time, to really help people tell the stories. And because of that, I've joined the Academy of Motion Pictures and Television Academy, the PGA, BAFTA, which is fun to see films that BAFTA chooses, and just really be a part of this great community. And I want to thank everybody for inviting me to be part of today's panel. So thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. And next we have Edward Hanrahan, Director of Virtual Production at William F. White International. Edward.
Hello, everyone. Also, thank you so much for inviting me to join the panel today. I think there's some really interesting topics here that I'm really excited to discuss with everybody else that's part of this. I'm coming at this, I have a background in animation and compositing. I started to get involved with real-time and Unreal and virtual production a number of years ago. And of course, since then, looking at this from sort of a VFX background, and now moving over to the William F. White international side of this film production, and going back and working with Chris and Pixamundo, I'm just really excited to be exploring film production from sort of this angle, which is much broader view of how movies get made and how film and television is produced from inception all the way to final edit. Just really excited about everything that's on the horizon for production moving forward, and using tools like virtual production is great, but also the chance that we have now after COVID to step back and look at sort of, and really kind of evaluate filmmaking as a whole and say, how do we want to restart this, reboot this, and what are the best paths forward? It's a really exciting time. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Edward.
Yeah, excited with you, Edward. There's some good topics here, and the world's our oyster, just how we choose to view it. Very excited here to introduce Jennifer Lauren. Jennifer is the director of the Cherokee Nation Film Office, as well as the director of original content for the Cherokee Nation. Jennifer, take it away.
Osio Nagada, Jennifer Lauren Dawado. Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Lauren. I am a citizen of the Cherokee Nation. And as Lindsay said, I'm the director of the Cherokee Nation Film Office and original content. So I am a filmmaker in documentary film. My tribe hired me to create film for our people, which is what we have been doing. So we've been creating content. Along the way, we discovered the need for a film office. And so our tribe has been investing in creating content and supporting the film industry in our state and in our region, our state being Oklahoma. Through those efforts, we also want to tell our story. The mission of the Cherokee Nation Film Office is to increase the presence of Native Americans in every level of the film and television industries, while creating jobs and opportunities for economic development in our Cherokee Nation reservation area. One of the ways that we discovered we could do that is inject the local film industry with a sound stage with virtual production capabilities. So we recently opened and have been in a soft opening phase of a virtual production soundstage here in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area, where we are currently producing content to save the Cherokee language, to do a lot of different things for our people, but we're also opening it up to the film industry in our region to utilize as well. But it's very exciting. I have learned a lot of new vocabulary in working with virtual production and XR, and I'm very excited to be on this panel and to hear more about the future of film in this way.
Well, great. Well, thank you, Jennifer. So we're going to dive right into the topic. And again, the future of production couldn't be more timely, and it's because it's really affecting the here and now. And so the first thing that comes to mind when I was putting this together is sort of we're all going through, which is this demand for content. This seems to be this unbelievable time where there's not enough content being produced. So I wanted to ask all the panelists, maybe starting with Glenn, is this a boom or is this a bubble? Is this all being caused because streaming services and their need for content, or is it related to COVID-19 where we've consumed all the content that's available and there's a need for more? So I'd be curious what you think, Glenn, and we'll ask the other panelists the same question.
Yeah, this is not in my situation. This is a celebration of storytellers. It's finally, I think we're in a place where technology is allowing the empowerment of stories to be told, many of those stories that couldn't have been told otherwise. Being someone who worked in a studio system at another studio, if your business is strictly only theatrical, then you have a business model that adhere to. You have to ask questions like, what's the event? What's the sense of urgency? How many screens can I get? And 3,000 screens. So there were these sort of the traditional theatrical motion picture had to adhere to, and it had some challenges. And today we're at a precipice where our able to tell more stories than ever before. And as we all lean into the disciplines of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're going to see more fantastic stories from different perspectives and points of view needed. So I'm just, again, that's why I wanted to come over to Amazon. As much as I enjoyed my time at another great studio, I saw more opportunity for storytellers to be empowered.
Great. I'm just going to jump over to Tom, just bringing a different perspective, a non-producer perspective in terms of, this content explosion and sort of how you see it today and how you see it evolving.
Sure. Well, the famous Yogi Berra said, "The future ain't what it used to be," right? And I think it's ringing true decade after decade since he's long been gone. I don't think it's boom or bust. I think it's an evolution. And that's kind of the term I would use to describe what's going on right now. And I think that evolution will continue. And I think it will continue into formats and forms that we are hearing about and reading about, as we saw with Facebook recently and their announcement of, the name change and their direction change. But I also think that for film and filmed entertainment or content, all of those changes technologically impact how our creators will disseminate or distribute their content. So it's positive. I think this evolution is a positive thing. And I think monetization of that content will also evolve and is evolving in tremendous ways. Of course, for lawyers like myself, we're hired to lose sleep at night over all the legal implications of these evolutions. And I see Lindsay smiling, but that is really what we do, and we try to predict and anticipate what could come next. And frankly, I think laws are outdated and behind the times. There's definitely some catching up that needs to be done, both in our copyright laws, but more broadly, the various laws that protect content creators and content owners need to be modernized. And so we can talk a little bit more about that, Joe and Lindsay, as we get into the panel, but this is an evolution.
I like that term. I do. And I liked what Glenn said as well. So Yolanda, so how do you see this current horizon, and where do you think it's heading?
Well, I would agree, and it's interesting related to your initial question, boom or bust. I feel that, as the business has continued to evolve and grow, and the amount of acceleration and increase in production, I think a lot of people tend to question, like, how much more can we do? Like, how much more will the market support and having the great amount of content, and potentially, we have a limited amount of eyeballs. But I don't think that particular part of the consideration is what's going to
Did we lose some folks?
Yolanda dropped off. I noticed that.
Uh-oh.
It's called the mic,
You're back, Yolanda.
mic drop moment.
Mic drop. I think we'll continue to see, this level of content creation and potentially more as there are platforms to continue to support it. The conversations that I've been having that's relevant to your question is there is a particular amount of resources, and by that I mean people and equipment and locations and a skilled labor force and all of those things. And given the great the explosion of production that we've seen, particularly coming out of the pandemic, I think we're all in a place where we're seriously competing for those resources, and sometimes even with ourselves. So I think that's going to be the piece that probably needs to shift a good amount and evolve quickly so that we can continue to maintain the level that we're at and potentially increase.
Well, we're definitely going to talk more about infrastructure and crew a little bit later, but the real interesting question is how can technology sort of help fill that void now and going forward? So I'm really curious to hear from Edward and Chris, but I just wanted to jump to Jennifer really quick, because we talk about boom or bubble, but given where you are, Jennifer, you're in Oklahoma, you're representing the Cherokee Nation. I mean, you're approaching this sort of explosion of content demand very differently. So I'd love to get your perspective.
Absolutely. So we're in one of those places that is not typically known to be a hub for film and television production, but we feel like that you're here. So I think that, from our perspective, we see that we can provide a lot of the same things that can be provided on the coasts, on the East and West Coast in Canada. We can do that right here in Oklahoma. And then with our, increasing film incentive that we have here in the state, and then we add on to that our virtual production soundstage, we have seen a huge influx of projects that maybe once were not interested in coming to the center of the United States for film production that are now looking at us. And I only see that increasing. And I think that the boom in technology, as technology continues to move forward at the rate that it's moving, I think that only increases the opportunities for those of us that are not on one of the coasts or a more traditionally thought of film and television production hub.
Great. So I'm going to ask Edward and Chris, sort of the tag team at this question, since they sort of are coming at this from the sort of the same place in terms of technology. So obviously you guys are probably super busy in terms of how your technology is being used, but how do you see the current environment of production today and where it's headed?
Yeah, I think piggybacking on what Jennifer was saying, that there's less restriction on where the hubs can be now. Anyone can be anywhere with virtual production, and as technology continues to advance, artists can be anywhere in the world, and while you're on a virtual production volume, any of the environments can take you anywhere in the world. So no longer do you have to be restricted to specific hubs, and you also get to tap into different pools of on-set people and artists that are not on set. You get to tap into a variety of different markets, a variety of different resource pools, and eventually we can expand our reach to realms that may not have had the opportunity in the past.
Yeah, and I think that along with that is as we start going more and more international with a lot of this content creation, we get the opportunity to fold in more and more cultural viewpoints, and we start to be able to get more and more sort of unique and new content, which I think is really what a lot of people, sort of seem to be craving. 20 years ago, it was all about getting serialized with hundreds of episodes in a given show or project. But now I think a lot of content that's being produced is, a couple of seasons long, maybe, and maybe 2, maybe 3 seasons. But certainly not, I don't think you're seeing shows run for 10 years. And I think that just really reflects how the newness is what people really want to consume. And I think not just new from a North American standpoint, but new internationally, new culturally, new stuff, I think is really exciting to everyone, certainly to me. And so, I'm just really excited to move these production hubs globally and then see what comes back and how we can enjoy it here and how we can expose people to different types of content, different stories, new stories. Yeah.
So this is a perfect segue to our next question. Lindsay, take it away.
Wonderful, Joe. Thank you. Edward, I love what you were saying, because it's almost like what's driving that consumption, what's driving the rise of content? Is it how it's being consumed? Obviously, I can't ignore the fact that our audience here for the most part, are independent filmmakers. A lot of us here on the panel have connections or are with studios and big streaming companies and networks. So how are you viewing your relationship as you have to fulfill this demand of content in association with the support of independent filmmakers? We've obviously seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions this year already. We just feel like these companies are growing bigger and bigger and bigger. Where do you see the relationship with independent filmmakers? Tom, I wonder if you would like to get us started.
I think that probably the most change, or I guess the most significant event in the proliferation of content has been pipeline, right? The pipeline to distribution of content opened up massively in the past decade, and that has made the ability, I mean, it's completely disintermediated any distribution models, well, not all of them, but a significant number of them in tremendous ways. I mean, the rise of the streaming services were thanks to that, obviously. But I think that as that pipeline has grown and will continue to grow, I don't think, we're now on 5G, but there's 6 and beyond. And I think that will introduce experiences and content that will be even beyond what we're seeing now. I mean, enjoying a film or television program on your screen, large screen at home in HD and beyond is great experience now, but imagine feeling like you're there in the actual film or on the set or any other setting. I think that's not far away. And I think that pipeline will be continuing to be a significant driver of where we all go, where our business goes. And the pipeline companies, those who provide us our service, the Verizons and the AT&Ts and others, are dedicated to continue to grow that pipeline. So I think that will be a driver of everything that we all do.
Yeah. Great.
I wanted to ask Glenn a question as somebody who basically his career started in the independent film space, with all this sort of consolidation happening and also these SPACs acquiring content. Again, going back to Lindsay's point, what happens to the independent producer? Where does their content end up? And especially with the shift from people not going to the theaters as much, hopefully that will shift back. Just wonders what happens to that independent product.
Well, I've got a lot of friends in the market. Again, that was where I started my career in independent films. One thing's never changed: the need to tell. That's at the core of everything we do. Friends who make documentaries who have never been more prolific, because again, the marketplace didn't allow them to get their content seen in the manner that it could be seen today. I mean, I was watching I think Yolanda, I think that's your network, Paramount Plus, Viacom, and what an incredible documentary. I just couldn't stop watching it, and I didn't have that opportunity to do that before, so, and I was texting somebody, it's like, you need to see this film, and that opportunity that we used to, I live in Los Angeles, and we took it for granted that, I guess, of course, New York, San Francisco, to see these kinds of movies. Well, that's not great for getting stories out there. So the fact that anybody can pick up a trend from anything is pretty fantastic. What I love about how the marketplace has changed as well is that we're not monolithic in the kinds of films we're choosing. It used to be that the studio bosses all lived within 10 miles of each other. And it was a monolithic perspective of films they thought, the world seeing great films from, movies and series from coming from South Korea that's blowing people's minds,
Yep.
So So, huge shout out to local original that is just, showing us these incredible stories that we didn't have the opportunity to see before. I can go on, but I just think I think this is to tell stories.
No, that's right on point. Goes what Edward said and what you're saying, Glenn, is that this is something that Lindsay and I were talking earlier about this, producing locally, but distributing globally, like with Squid Games. It's like, a show that none of us would ever have expected and sort of taking over the world. Everyone didn't I read it's the most viewed program ever on a streaming platform, or pretty close to that. So it's like to get other people's thoughts about that concept of producing locally and distributing globally.
I mean, I think that one of the things used to be that the cost of distribution, even after making your project, the cost of distribution was enormous. And now, with OTT and distribution platforms like that, they're democratizing the ability of these independent filmmakers. Just making the film, I think, is getting cheaper. When you look at digital cameras versus film cameras, and now with virtual production, there's a lot of ways you can make your content cheaper, or films that could never have been made otherwise. And so, making content is getting cheaper, and now distributing it isn't, like Glenn was saying, it's not run by these studio heads that all live within 10 miles of each other. These are open. Some of these are open platforms. You look at YouTube, you look at, but at least these global streamers are picking up this content, and they're fulfilling the audience appetite and saying, this is a cool show. We're going to make it available to everybody in the world. And it's definitely something like Squid Games that we never would have seen otherwise. So I think it's kind of two things at play there. There's how can we build these things and then demonetize them and make them really accessible? And then how can we get that content out and distribute it globally?
Two things just popped in my mind that just got. I remember once I was in Mumbai, India, at a place called Thieves Market, kind of shopping around and just taking in all these great sensations, and it's a little shop, and they had a movie poster, it was Jungle Book in this particular case. The movies from Hollywood with Deadhead in Mumbai, I meant that they traveled the world, and the poster traveled the world. And then where did it end? In this case, in most of them, they stopped in. I see some really classic posters and stuff. Just go Mumbai by way of Abu Dhabi or Dubai or something. Go to and see if you can find these old posters. I bought one. Shows you how the industry has changed. And then one other anecdote that pops to my mind. I remember at Sony sitting with the president of the studio, and impressed as he should have been at the time. He said, "Well, kiddo, right now, 80% of my movie, that was a deal, and they were prints,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just, you think all those prints they had to make and get and drop day and date, right? So we've gone from traveling slowly over the course of a year to what we used to call day and date, for the world, and to that we live now, where we can just like drop it or let it stay in a territory and the core audience, and then people start to get excited and let it flourish.
And Joe, I would just add, even to thinking globally and producing globally, and you can distribute everywhere, because we have so many more avenues and places that we want to distribute content. There's a broader spectrum of the stories that we want to tell, which actually prompts us to go and produce content in more parts of the world than we were doing before, and to telling more stories that take place in other places. And so it takes us in different places to make our content. So it's just expanded across the globe.
Yeah.
Have that sort of global all shared experience that everyone's gone through with the COVID-19. Globally, everyone's got this shared experience, and now, as a result of a shared experience, looking for more content, there's a demand and a necessity to serve and represent every film market, every market around the world, and serve them all at once. And I think that's a really great thing, that it's kind of in a cog, some shared experience that then craves additional shared experiences for representation in film and TV.
Now, I wanted to give Jennifer a chance to talk, because again, we're talking about original content, and given in the Cherokee Nation, talking about some of the stories that may be coming out of there, and where it's being showcased. I know there's one big series that just shot in Oklahoma, Reservation Dogs, that's getting a lot of notoriety. So just want to see, Jennifer, if there's anything else you wanted to highlight about what's coming out of Cherokee Nation, what's coming out of Oklahoma in general.
Thank you. So Native Americans are represented in traditional media at a rate of less than 0.5%. And that is tragic. That is one of the reasons that my film office exists. And so I would like to, just listening to everything you all are saying on the last question, I wholeheartedly agree, and I understand, and I see where everything is going. But from my perspective, with me trying to accomplish my mission of getting more Indigenous people in front of the camera and behind the camera, and in the boardrooms, we're trying to push even further and sort of flip the script in a new way, where I'm saying, hey, I have a virtual production soundstage here. Let's create some Cherokee content and start representing Cherokees and Native Americans at a higher level, at a higher rate. And so I think that when you're talking about creating content to address and to give people what they want, essentially, right? Because there are a lot of more viewers viewing from a lot more places. You can give them all what they want. But we're also trying to push that forward even more and say, we're going to be the content creators and help content creators to create what we want to push out there to people. And so we're looking for new ways to partner with studios and all kinds of other options to start creating more Native American Indigenous content.
Amazing, Jennifer. I think that's a great segue into something, Yolanda, that you actually mentioned a little bit earlier around, just the shortage of either skilled labor, either domestically around the world, as well as sound stages, equipment, you name it, because the explosion of this content is just, tapped in a lot of existing resources. And where do you see a need for additional resources, and what types from your specific vantage point?
Well, for me specific, I'm actually really great. I'm glad to hear from Jennifer today. And I've actually had recently some opportunities to learn more about shooting in Oklahoma. And I think it would be great if we can find and be able to avail ourselves to more shooting locations within the United States. I mean, very frequently that's tied to being able to take advantage of some film production incentives so that we can, meet our objectives on the finance side. But, now that there are, a few more coming online, we need basically from the shooting crew is a big part of, where we find it, particularly in markets that are heavily produced and that have these film incentives. We all tend to go there because we know that we can find skilled crew there. However, there's such a greater volume of production. We're using it all. So to the extent that each of these production locations and maybe some additional ones online can field and create incentive programs either through their existing workforce and the colleges and universities, or by maybe attracting skilled labor from other production centers to come and work and live in their location somehow, so that we have comfort that we can go there and be able to shoot well. That's the puzzle. That's the thing that we need next. And also you know, if there's investment in infrastructure and stages in some of these locations, that helps as well.
You know, and Yolanda, I want to come back to that, but I really want to jump to Tom for a second, because I know we talked very generally about the mergers and the consolidations that are going on. But the other thing that I just wanted to get his perspective is these special purpose acquisition corps and their acquiring of content. Just kind of curious if you have any thoughts in terms of what their long-term intentions is. Again, it's just if everything's sort of been getting consumed, you know, these smaller players are coming in, I'm assuming with the hope of becoming bigger players.
Well, I wish you had asked the boom or bubble question on that topic, because I would definitely put that one in the bubble category. In my view, you know, SPACs are nothing new. They've been around a long time. They just happen to kind of have a resurgence in the past 18 months or so due to a number of different factors, including some promoters who were very successful at convincing investors to bring vehicles. But look, I think there is an abundance of capital in the markets right now for M&A and other types of activity in this space, particularly, and we're seeing music is having, you know, a tremendous golden era once again, greater than the time when CDs were the biggest cash cow for record companies. And I think, you know, we're seeing the same with content. And the M&A activity, I think, is driven by the fact that there are opportunities to consolidate and find economies of scale among those enterprises, with most of that being focused on a streaming play. And that's, you know, the reality of it. And we're seeing what's happening with Viacom and CBS. We've seen this with a number of other organizations where the focus has become heavily on their streaming platforms and services. And I think that's, in one way, that's multiple versions of consolidation, whether it's within the same company or with various companies consolidating in order to strengthen that play. With the view being that, you know, the appetite for content and services is insatiable, and has been, frankly, due to pandemic. I mean, the pandemic accelerated many things, but I think it was the inevitable, where we were going, the direction we were going. So look, I think that we'll continue to see some consolidation. I think as credit markets and interest tighten and credit and interest rates go up, we might see some pulling back, but that may still be a way out before we see the M&A kind of frenzy slow down.
So, no, go ahead, please.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just going to say, but, you know, we really want to start talking a bit more about how we're producing, especially the new technologies, and give Chris and Edward a chance to talk. But I really wanted to jump to Glenn and kind of go off of what Yolanda was saying in terms of where we're producing. Because I know that before COVID, incentives was the main driver. And then during COVID, it was like, where do we go where it's safe and we can still produce? And now granted, we're not out of COVID, but it's subsided a bit in most places. I'm hearing from most places the real decision is incentives is not number one anymore. It's where can I go where there's crew, infrastructure, and hopefully incentives. So I just wanted, you know, your thoughts about, you know, as you're sitting here thinking about productions, what are the sort of the top three things that come to mind when you're trying to figure out where to go?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure Yolanda can relate to this too. I've a few years sitting in the boardrooms of studios and talking about where to shoot pictures and so forth. And I said, well, guys, let me grab the conversation here. There's an uptick of 20% in content creation, but they haven't invented more crew just yet, right? Mm-hmm. That was the change, and I think we felt that starting about 4 years ago, where it just got and legislation has a lot to do with where you film. I remember sitting down with a senator from the state of California, discussing at that time the idea of the California tax. And, what goes into my decision of films? And I said, well, let me tell you what goes into it. What I think about and what many studio executives and filmmakers think about is not where I want to shoot, but where you tell me I can shoot. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you're the
tell me I can shoot in this state, legislate something, and
we know you
want us here.
And he said, I get it. So it really is important. State, yeah, because the other where we can shoot, and as have many countries, almost is like a welcoming committee to say, we want this kind of business in our region of the world. And so it has definitely shaped the marketplace. We know that certain kinds of films that may take advantage of an above the line credit, and certain films may shoot in other states where it's more below the line credit. And so we have to always navigate that, but story absolutely matters. It's just that, as a friend of mine who made a film called Occidental Tourist said a long time ago, he said, in the 70s when I got a script and it said, fade in Baltimore, cut to Paris, we went to Baltimore, we went to Paris, and we figured out how much it cost when we got home. And we don't have that luxury anymore. We've got to, like Baltimore, say, okay, you could probably shoot that in Boston, okay? Paris, yeah, I bet you could cheat that in, and you very rarely think about
Montreal, exactly.
And
that's South Africa.
Yeah, that works. So
it's true.
It's just so that's the game that's played today. And sometimes somebody will say, like, no, you know what, guys, and we're doing this at Amazon. There was a film where the film director said, I really want to shoot in Oregon. It's important to me, and we got them to those two states to make that film. So I throw out a lot of this, but I don't want you to think that decisions are made insincere. Balance. We can, as I say, allow us an opportunity to be thoughtful as to where we want to place the film. Or as I will sometimes joke, I say, well, hold on a second, guys. How long did it take you to write the script? I say, a year. I said, give me figure out where to put it down.
I'm hearing a theme as we've been asking questions. It's like, how do we do more with less? Either like, how do we pump up more content? How do we do it with limited resources, whatever? So I'm curious, Chris and Edward, you literally at that leading edge of technology. We're hearing about virtual stages and LED walls. Tell us about that world, and can we scale by using technology?
Speaking from the content side, I think the fact is that we can access and reform education to fit this new technology. We're in augmented and real-time rendering, and we are running with Unreal Engine. So we can also grab any resource, any artist that is willing and wants to participate at any age after they've gotten to know the foundations of the platform that we use. That's accessible worldwide, and we don't really have as much restriction for the content creation to put on the walls, on the volumes. And that means we can tap into younger artists or people that are updating their skill sets, because it is a brand new form of producing content that we just need everyone to augment their skills to, and we'll tap into wherever. So we get an opportunity to expand to what artists we can leverage. And so I find that a lot of it right now is that we do need more resources, but that's also only a restriction of it being new. So there's an opportunity for education to change, for people to grow their skill sets globally and catch up. And we'd like to be participants in helping educate. We want to bring people on board to generate the content that simply are artists that are interested in developing, however age, whatever their background, because we can develop wherever we want to take that content wherever we'd like with virtual production.
Fascinating.
And just to touch on how technology can kind of help with like physical crew shortages. If you're shooting something, say on an LED volume, you're getting a huge amount of sort of natural light just from the volume as a base. So you can free up some lighting grips, like maybe you don't need as robust a crew, or maybe you can get more shots out per day. Certainly, you're seeing stages that are built on giant revolving turntables, and that directly translates into fewer camera setups in a given shoot day. Which just means people are producing content at a faster rate, which means these crews can be rolling off one project right onto the next, and really just focusing on the creative and less of the technical setup, and just speeding the overall process up, which I think is a core tenet of virtual production outside of the physical technology. It's about sort of a workflow, and involving everybody sort of at the onset, so that decisions can be made on set, and you're not going through this really long post-production quagmire sometimes, where maybe some of the key creatives have rolled off the project onto something else. Maybe it's 6 months or a year later, and you're trying to get the production designer's opinion on something that's happened, or the art directors who are on other projects. So, it's about, let's speed the whole process up, but then also let's, make these key creative choices on set on a given day. And that, has exponential, increases to productivity as well. So.
Edward and Chris, I want to ask a question, because I read an article a week or so ago in the New York Times, and the director of Dune was quoted that he refused to shoot on green screens and shot on location. So I'm just curious, could Dune have been shot with LED screens and all virtually, or is that technology there yet?
Yes, but it's Denis Villeneuve, so I'm not gonna offer much of a critique for it. But yeah, I think part of it is that it's a new technology, it's a new component to the industry, and there's comfort levels. And what's fun about that is that we get to make new habits and get to make new procedures that everyone gets to leverage as a new shiny toy. So ultimately, yeah, the movie could have been shot on a virtual production stage. It's great that it was chosen not to, because it looks fantastic. We haven't seen it, but that also means that we know what bar we've got to get at to make sure directors like that and content creators like that are ready to be comfortable with using virtual production and using the technology. So the bar has been set, and we're going to go after that bar to make sure everyone does have the accessible comfort levels to use the technology alongside us.
Yeah, and those locations. It was Abu Dhabi and the Wadi Rum. So United Arab Emirates and the Kingdom of Jordan were the two main nations. But very briefly, my take on that is, as you offer filmmakers the opportunity to collapse geography, and say that I can to the Wadi Rum, but you're actually in Cherokee Nation on the volume, is a opportunity, because not everybody's going to have the financial opportunities to go to the United Arab Emirates and the soundstage in the UK where it might have been. So, then Edward and Chris, you're all offering more opportunities to tell those very unique and special stories.
Yeah, exactly. If you're Denis Villeneuve and you have the resources, or you do have the resources to go and shoot those places, I mean, that's really special. That's really amazing. What I'm excited for too is all these smaller independent projects that don't have those resources, And now we're giving, we're making these tools available to people that say, hey, I want to go shoot in Wadi Rum, but I'm doing a $5 million indie feature, and that's never going to happen. So we're enabling these people to tell those stories at like a significant, like an order of magnitude, sort of a smaller project, which is just as valid. You know what I mean? It's, again, like as Glenn keeps coming back to, the story is what's critical. The story is what's critical. And you want to make it accessible for anybody to tell any story and put that out there and then see what comes back.
So I have a practical, like a filmmaking question to riff off of that. So if we've got people in the audience that are interested and curious to start trying this kind of technology in their filmmaking process, like how does that change up like their financing structure, their editing space? Like, are they, because when people first started deciding, am I going to film on a RED or some other kind of camera, it started opening up so many different questions. So does this have a major impact where you really have to reconfigure your thinking, or is it just a cool add-on that you can now shoot that scene that you might have had to cut if it wasn't going to work for your budget?
Considerations for camera and lensing and those sort of things, just immediately, you can use what you'd like to use. We don't have to, there's not really a restriction in that regard. So certain structures like that, you're still going to operate in your traditional format. But what you will, in order to like reframe the cost and the budgeting, is that, you're going to get more chances to shoot takes during the day at the same daylight throughout the entire day. And so there's going to be less variables on the back end of your costs. So maybe you can throw those costs elsewhere. We'd like to be able to suggest that if you go through it as a collaborator, you get to get more in camera successfully rather than having to go to post. And therefore you do have a stricter budget that you can operate in without the additional variables in the back end. So, I think what you're going to get is to reframe the budget is putting the money and the collaborative budget into prep, getting the post teams, the content creators involved earlier, and then effectively doing that sort of partnership allows you to have a more structured budget, less variable costs at the end, and effectively it bring your budgets down and get a lot more done in a short period of time.
We just had a film in our production stage last week that was a road trip film, and so they needed to be across the country, and they needed to be there at sunrise, and they needed to be there at sunset, and they needed to be there at dark, and so they were able to scenes inside the vehicle across the country at sunrise, at sunset, and at dark. So it significantly cut their budget in that regard. That's just one example of how it's useful.
On top of that, I guess during the pandemic as well, you have a lot more clarity on COVID compliance. Theoretically, I think you're isolating the same people each day on the same location. You're coming to the same place. You have a little bit more control over your compliance. So the safety measures, I think, allows you to have a lot more strict compliance that makes everything a little bit safer, and everything should be as safe as possible. So having a virtual production stage in a consistent setting, you've got more control over COVID compliance. You've got more control, obviously, on the creative side over light. You've got an opportunity to your talent and your actors and actresses to actually see what's on the wall rather than a green thing where they're maybe struggling to act on the take. There's a lot of variables that are cut out. You get a lot more opportunity to get more in camera per day and effectively reduce your budget and have a smoother experience to cut the variables afterwards.
And the reason I asked the question, because when I was researching to put this panel together, a lot of articles that I was reading, they were talking about new stages being built and how these new stages were going to be basically virtual stages, so the producers would not have to go on location. And they were using reasons like, again, if there's ever another pandemic, they basically can contain their production and don't have to worry about traveling. So I'm just curious, and we're going to talk more about infrastructure, but I remember, Tom, you might remember a couple of years ago when Wanda was building their huge facility. I don't even know where it ended up today, but at one point they were trying to create this huge backstage where they were going to have one stage that represented every key filming location in the world. It never happened. And I kind of feel the same sense that the way virtual is moving right now, we're kind of trying to contain it, right? Where it's so you don't have to leave and you can all stay in one place. So I'm just curious, as you're dealing with a lot of different investors, I'm just reading a lot about how infrastructure is really a lot of investment in infrastructure. In fact, the governor just signed a bill here in California in July, which again, it's sort of a new program, and whereby there's at least another $150 million available to producers that produce in new or renovated stages, and also possibility of getting an additional bump for diversity hiring. So curious about your thoughts on that, Tom.
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you pointed that out. I have a client that is taking the benefit of that at the moment on a new facility that they're building here in Southern California. Look, I think, we've talked about the reasons why shooting on a virtual stage or any stage where you can recreate the setting that you are looking to have in your film or production makes sense. And I think the pandemic definitely has underscored the value of that because it's a controlled environment in many ways. We had a production, to your point of South Africa, Lindsay, we had a production that shut down the day before the lockdown came in South Africa. That was the good news that we wrapped. The bad news was we had to get people out, and that was a challenge for the following weeks. And I think people are looking for some certainty and peace of mind at the moment, knowing that face those issues. And that's why I think being on a stage is a safer, I guess, option. There is definitely a boom right now in facility and infrastructure development. I'm helping a client who is building a very large stage at the old Sears location in Hollywood. And in the past year, I've helped clients acquire over 1 million square feet of studio space, and there's no end in sight because streaming app or content, most of which is episodic and most of which is stage based, there's just a shortage of space, and they're not building fast enough. California did a big thing with the incentive to encourage more of that infrastructure. I think we'll see maybe some of these other states. I don't know, Joe and Lindsay, you may know better. If you're seeing some incentives in other states coming down the pipeline for infrastructure building that would boost that. But I think that will be an important part of growing a local industry like tax credits did to attract location shoots.
There are definitely other locations like New Mexico that have basically tweaked their incentive legislation to promote the construction or investment in infrastructure. And we're seeing that happen in New Mexico. We're seeing that happen in New Jersey. And I'd be curious to ask Chris and Edward, who are up in Canada. I'm also reading there's also a lot of construction going on in Vancouver and Toronto as well.
Yeah, and certainly, yeah. I think there's a lot of infrastructure development going on everywhere. Yeah, in Canada currently, like William F. White, we have, I think, close to 2 million square feet of stage space throughout Canada, and we're constantly trying to find more, and we're constantly talking to shows that are looking for. I mean, there a lot of shows now, especially if you want to talk about virtual production, you're looking for a very specific type of building that wasn't you need really high ceilings. You don't want to, pillarless, and the ability to draw huge amounts of electricity. So even people are exploring buildings that aren't like a classic warehouse or purpose-built soundstage facility. So there's a huge demand, and I think people are starting to get creative with, well, what do we actually need? And figuring out, okay, well, this can fit a volume. And that can cover, that can count as 30,000 square feet of stage space, because we're going to get a lot more different environments out of it. And so how can we extract more use out of what we have, and what buildings can we utilize that might traditionally have been sort of overlooked. So you're seeing people really try to think outside of the box, which so which is exciting, and I think there's tons of buildings out there that maybe people haven't sort of realized, hey, I could put an awesome stage in here. But of course, a lot of the stuff you just have to build, and whether it's backlots or whether it's virtual production stages, making big films takes a lot of space, and putting those in appealing locations that are inside the union travel zone. That's a big one. And stars want to shoot near cities, and that's something that impacts the decision as well. So there's a lot of things to balance.
Yeah, and producers are generally problem solvers. I mean, when the pandemic came out, we had a lot of, started Master Series panels at Entertainment Partners, and it was just so fascinating how every producer had their own viewpoint of how to solve the item. And Yolanda, you obviously are on the task force, on the PGA, to really think about these things. And as we're talking about the future of production, just as you think you got your handle on one thing, something else changes. So what advice can you, maybe Yolanda, we start with you, what advice could you give, independent filmmakers out there where they're trying to navigate all kinds of things, but ultimately want to have a successful career in this world where there's so much content being created? What would you ground yourself in to just focus on as your true north in the current and future space of film production?
It doesn't fall directly within my day-to-day and my purview, but I am a firm believer that the source material of your content, the story you're trying to tell, it always starts with story. That's where it starts and ends, the success of it. I mean, you might have some challenges on the production standpoint, but what's going to drive the marketability of your content, and how many different places that you can garner interest and possibilities to get it done. To your point, we are all filmmakers who, producers are problem solvers, and we, whatever, each one of them is a different puzzle. So all of that is going to take care of itself. I'm just a firm believer in having really great underlying story and content.
Great advice. Glenn, I know you have a specific viewpoint on what drives success. What drives the future success of filmmaking?
Well, I think it was Mel Brooks who said the hardest thing about making a film was putting all those holes in the side of the film. So there's like 1 million of them. Not anymore. I am it's just going to depend on the story that you're trying to do. I mean, I'm not going to be necessarily producing My Octopus Teacher in. Not going to work. Mm-hmm. The River is not, but it's not, give you the ocean that you need for that scene. So, you just got to ground yourself with what you feel is your value. I mean, look, I remember when we mentioned Abu Dhabi a little while ago, I was remembering that when I shot a picture there, I had some interns on set, and they asked a woman who's maybe she was 17 years old, you know, if you got to tell a story, what? And this was maybe 8 years ago, and she said, I wish I could tell the story about what it's like to be a young Emirati woman, because everybody knows the American teenager, but nobody knows me. So she's going to tell her story in that region, and I pray that she does. You know, so it's kind of like when an old jazz musician said to me when we had a place called Off Vine here, and I said to him, I said, man, I was just really moved by your music. You know, what album should I buy? And he said, son, the blues of the. I can't. You got to
find that on your own.
And that's the journey of filmmaking. It's all of us finding. But the great thing is that you have panels like this where you can hear others for all these kinds of ideas, but you know your own truth and you know how you want to tell your story. Again, technology is going to really empower that, and that's, you know, it's an enviable time for filmmakers.
But I wanted to jump back to crew issues and crew shortages, the whole topic of human capital. I mean, how is the industry addressing crew shortages? I know at Entertainment Partners, we have a variety of courses that are trying to train the next generation of production accountants. But outside of the world of production finance, can you all share, if you're aware, what else is being done by the industry to help sort of train up that next generation, but not just the next generation, to really fill the need that's out there? Any thoughts? I'll start. Jump back to whoever. Is that you, Jennifer?
Yeah, I can say, you know, here in Oklahoma, you know, with our film incentive increasing to $30 million a year, we have definitely had to step up our efforts across the board as far as creating more crew to sustain the industry at that level, which, you know, we have been working on that for years. And we have several academies, certificate programs, all kinds of different things that are popping up around the state to address that crew shortage. And I would say just in the last year alone, one of our schools, if you want to call it a school, graduated 500 crew who immediately got jobs on film sets right after that and are now in the workforce. And so I think that when you have forward-looking states and regions like Oklahoma and the Cherokee Nation, we're all in. Our Cherokee Nation Film Office just partnered with the Oklahoma State University Tulsa campus to create a film lab. We're paying for the equipment so that we can get more people in the industry. And so when you have a state or a region that is all in, that understands the need and what will become after providing those people and really building that industry in a smart way, then we'll see the fruits of our labor. You know, the benefit will come to us. And so we are all, and we're trying to do everything we can to have a crew available for any project that wants to come to our region.
And I think California is doing the same thing. I know the California Film Commission is definitely, you know, working on different job training programs. And again, going back to the bill the governor signed in July, there is an educational component in there as well, that a certain amount of money has to go back into the state to sort of create programs to help train individuals. So Yolanda, with your different affiliation with the different guilds, how are they getting involved or at least initiating any sort of training?
You know, right now at the Producers Guild, what we're doing is we have something called One Guild Committee. And the focus there is to increase representation across our membership of, you know, underrepresented groups. So I think in that way, what we're doing is we're bringing in more individuals who've had some barriers to getting into the business, people who have the skill set, who you know, have some experience, but potentially aren't getting the repeat business, you know, opportunity to be hired and brought into production. So we have several initiatives that we're doing there, including, you know, some emerging type producer programs and so forth to bring that group of individuals up. And I think if we make a bigger effort to open the doors, I was actually going to say, you know, I would love to see, I really appreciate how all the guilds and unions do a good job of representing their membership and protecting and making sure that they have good working conditions and so forth. I'd like to see some more efforts along those lines of what we're doing is to basically broaden the membership and bring more people in, so that I think that will go a long way towards addressing, kind of the shortages that we're seeing. Obviously, you want a skill. We don't want to just have anyone come in and do job functions that require a certain proficiency, particularly in technical and so forth. But if we're opening the doors and creating a better situation where we're looking around and finding talent that maybe they just didn't have the entry point, and continuing to offer them programs or mentorship or avenues for connectivity to people who are hiring, I think that will go a long way towards addressing part of this problem.
Well, we all know it's all over the news right now in terms of the issue of qualified crew and safety on set. So it's a very serious matter of making sure that the proper training is in place. So now I wanted to ask one other question. We're doing a really great job actually in covering a lot of the questions that are coming in from the audience. So I don't know if we're actually going to have any formal Q&A, but we've been talking a lot about what's going on in front of the camera. But I remember doing a webinar last summer, and we had a lot of Canadian producers, and they were line producers, and they were talking about how they produce have changed because of different digital tools that are available. So I'm just curious to talk about and hear what you're thinking about digital products and tools that are available to producers behind the scenes, and how maybe COVID-19 either implemented the creation of these tools or expedited the use of these tools. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I'll just jump into it. I'm a big fan of LED lights. It used to be a revolution. I mean, I was greenlighting a movie, or I was part of the greenlight committee for a movie called Think Like a Man, and we just could not figure out how to make the film for the price that the studio wanted us to make it for. And I said, okay, well, no HMI lights. They're gone. We're not going to use them. And we went down the street. We were shooting in Culver City, where my studio was, and we shot Rush Street for Rush Street and Akasha for Akasha. These regular restaurants, and we said, nope, this is it. You can move the couch, the tables, but you can't replace the tables. Kinds of things that embraced the world around us and augmented with and just plugged them into the side of the wall. That helped get a film greenlit. So, big is not better. I think that try to embrace all the technology that's around us. If you're shooting in a big city, as I tell some filmmakers, it's amazing how much money New York City's. Don't fight it.
If you can embrace it, you walk and talk and augment, use batteries. And
be environmentally friendly, by the way, because now you're not using as much, fuel things. And that also speaks again to the volumetric capture stages, because you're not traveling as much in that situation. So the answers are all around. Lean into those solutions that are evolving.
Yeah, I think further to that, along with the previous question as well, is that there's a lot to tools of being developed for virtual tech scouts, virtual previs, those sort of things, where people can be wherever they want and be able to actually see the environments they want to either build or go shoot in. Part of Pixelmundo's initiatives, and I believe William F. White's initiatives as well, is that we want to connect with schools, local schools, to bring students in to see the stages, because the technology, it's expensive. Having a location is expensive, but offering up a location, a volume, a stage that people can come train on to see its values and cater their education towards virtual production to create a more accessible type of shooting is one thing, but also developing different components of the traditional film and VFX pipeline and converting that into real-time rendered solutions. So as we build up our libraries of various sets that we've built for any of the volumes and any of the stages, those turn into opportunities to do virtual tech scouts, and people can travel the world and design their shots via Unreal, via our real-time rendering solutions that allow people to design their projects and budget their projects a little bit more effectively up front.
Love that, Chris, because it reminds me of some of the incentive programs where you get incentivized when you're also giving back to the community in those programs. So that's lovely. Joe, I did want to bring to our attention, we did have probably about 7 or so more minutes left. We had a couple of questions in the Q&A section. Did we want to review them or round out the panel with some of our other topics we wanted to ask?
Well, I did want to go through them, but just before we did, I wanted to ask everybody one quick question, and then we'll go to the audience Q&A. Since we are talking about the future of production, I'm just curious if everyone could pull out their crystal ball and think about what things would going to look like 5 and 10 years from now. And I'm going to look at my Brady Bunch screen, and I'm seeing Tom. So I'll start with Tom. Where do you see us 5 years from now and 10 years from now?
Reverse alphabetical order next time, Joe, please. Well, I guess going back to one of the things I mentioned in the first question you asked me, I would say metaverse. For those of you who know what that is or have figured it out, like I did, I think that will. I wouldn't say that's the future of production, but it definitely will play a role in production and content distribution. And metaverse is a broad thing, right? It's not just virtual reality. It's not just games. It's not just NFTs. It's really a broad place where a lot of experiences will happen. And I think what Edward and Chris are doing on the production side, what Glenn is doing on content origination side, Jennifer's stages, Yolanda's programs, all this will be in some form or fashion in a metaverse that we all will experience. And definitely our kids and our grandkids will be much more attuned to it than we ever are. So metaverse, that's where I would.
That's thrilling and scary at the same time. I'm not sure. What about you, Chris? 5, 10 years from now, what are you seeing?
My mind's going back to the conversation about independent filmmakers, and a lot of the discussions we're having, Pixelmondo's having, and Edward Van William and White are having are getting a lot of questions from independent filmmakers, from lower budget films that are trying to say, well, how do we get to utilize this technology? What does it mean for us? And I think what we're hoping to see is not only the accessibility for large budget productions, but the more opportunity for independent films to get made in utilizing virtual production, because we want to make it accessibility. I do see the world, the filmmaking and television world, to have a lot more stages, meaning a lot more accessibility for a variety of budgets to operate in. And I really look forward to seeing that become a norm that allows many people to access some of the great tools that we're developing and that the industry is developing.
That's great. Yolanda, what does your crystal ball say?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I have a crystal ball, but I suppose what I do somewhat lament is, we've had this evolution of, there was once upon a time when, pre-streamers, there was a place for independent film to go, and kind of more art house, and then we kind of got away from that, and now the primary studios are doing branded IP, big content, and then the smaller things are falling a little bit by the wayside. But we did have this evolution where people found a platform via the internet and things like YouTube, and YouTube content and those kinds of, and then all of a sudden that became, now we have, YouTube is actually a player in the game, and even Awesomeness Television started out in that realm too, and is now a part of the studio. So I feel like, as we continue to have a proliferation of the streamers, there's going to be whatever the next iteration of what that YouTube is, that is going to be able to provide, the next evolution technologically and so forth, of how, particularly because so many kids, I know personally, and just, kind of being in that space, so many people say that They'll sit in front of a large screen television and consume content on a tiny screen on their phone, which, there's been a few players out there who've tried to address that, not quite so successfully, but I think somebody's going to figure out how to do that and capture that audience in a way that we aren't anticipating right now.
Good answer. Glenn, what about your crystal ball?
Well, to understand the future, we have to understand the past. And I remember a film, Midnight Cowboy, where
New York, and he was walking across the street, and a car almost hit him. And he said, "Hey, hey,
I'm walking here." And I may be wrong, but I was told that first that car, almost hit him. And I suppose in the future, if that's going to happen, it'll be powered by a game engine with a sub-millimeter point cloud technology that's driving that car, and is going to virtually almost hit him. So I just think that we're going to be seeing a lot of and worlds built with occlusions and sub-millimeter accuracy, and then filmmakers will just have to say, what do you think? You want to fly to New York, or do you want to just walk down the street and be in New York? And it'll just be a choice that people will make in the so-called metaverse of opportunities. But I've had the privilege of things get invented, and nothing is easy still at this point. I've seen people work for 3 or 4 years for games, and there's one person whose job is to understand different varieties of grass for the world building that they do, so somebody
and walk around effortlessly." So it's going to be a lot of
creative artists and a lot of research to build this virtual world that we may want to opt into.
That's a great answer as well. Wow. Okay, Jennifer, your crystal ball, shine it up.
Okay, 5 to 10 years from now, the state of Oklahoma will be a film hub that is equal footing with Louisiana, Georgia, New Mexico. I also am hopeful that in the future, the representation of Indigenous people in front of the camera, behind the camera, and in the boardroom will be much more than 0.5%. And I hope that the Cherokee Nation in Tulsa, Oklahoma is a mecca for Indigenous storytelling. We will likely have deals with both Yolanda and Glenn, with Amazon, Nickelodeon, and Awesomeness, to create Indigenous stories out of our virtual production soundstage here, and really increase that presence and continue to be on the cutting edge of technology when it comes to virtual film and television production right here in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay, I'm gonna look for that. So Edward, last but not least.
Yeah, I mean, I think people covered some really amazing points already. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about sort of new formats that are a little bit different, my daughter and her friends, they don't watch anything over 2 minutes. And yeah, it is really, it's fundamentally a different type of entertainment. Do you know what I mean? But also you do have shows on YouTube like Coco Melon that are pulling in 100 million views an episode, which is just bananas. So I think we'll see what is entertainment, sort of, that I think that's gonna sort of fundamentally change. But then you're also seeing, with the real-time development and tools like, machine learning and AI that take some of the really tedious aspects out of visual effects. I'm going to talk about that a bit. Rotoscoping, that's going to be fully automated. Camera tracking, that's going to be automated. So these are really big technical hurdles for somebody who wants to, say, do a movie that has an explosion in it. And I think we're going to, as we democratize those tools, it's going to just really lower that barrier to entry. And now somebody can go out with their, probably with their phone, shoot some background plates, shoot some foreground elements, and track it, roto out the characters, throw some explosions into a building in the background in Bob's Your Uncle. So I think you'll see that really, really AI will help lower that technical barrier significantly, and just make it really creative and really just get it into the hands of people that are trying to tell the story. Yeah.
Great. So Lindsay, I'm going to put you on the spot because we don't have a lot of time left. What does your crystal ball say?
It's so funny. Every time Ed says something, I'm like, it sparks a thing. And when you spoke about the 2-minute content, everyone's like attention to detail or that attention span's getting smaller and smaller. So I'm inspired a lot by music. So I'm thinking the world's going to be run by way of storytelling through a 2 or 3 minute song, and the visual has to just catch up with everything. So we're going to be very efficient, and it's going to be driven by just get to the point as quickly as you can.
Well, believe it or not, folks, we are almost out of time. So I just want to thank you all for being with us this evening, especially you, Tom. I know it's a little late for you in New York. For the audience, if we didn't answer your questions, please, you can shoot me or Lindsay an email, and we'd be happy to try to get back to you. But this really flew by. I was nervous about, first of all of us getting into this virtual atmosphere, but we all got here safe and sound, and we didn't have to leave our rooms. Hopefully, we all will be leaving our rooms soon. But I really want to thank you, Tom and Glenn and Edward and Yolanda, Jennifer and Chris, and of course my co-moderator Lindsay. And everyone, I hope you enjoy the rest of AFM. Thank you all.
Thank you, Lindsay and Joe.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.